and welcome to SP62. My name is Jimin Hwang, and I'm with the United Nations University Institute for Environment and Human Security. And I'm standing here in front of the crowd with our senior scientist, Dr. Simone Sandholz. Hello, welcome. So now that we're here at the SPs, so why is it important to look into the informality in the context of loss and damage, and why now?
Thanks a lot, Jimin, for that question. As you said, we're here at the SBs where a lot of climate topics are being discussed for 2 weeks. So there's the question of how can we ramp up climate adaptation, but also reduce emissions, which would be mitigation. But over the course of the last years, we've increasingly seen that there are and will be losses and damages from climate-induced disasters such as floods or heat waves. And we need to look into that and particularly support the most vulnerable countries, but within these countries, the most vulnerable people. And very often, it is these people that are living in informal settlements that do not have access to any formal security nets like unemployment insurances, or that can claim any losses and damages. So they basically are already very vulnerable and will be increasingly, and the number of these people will increase in the future. It's currently more than 1 billion already, and that will grow.
Okay. And in this context, why is data so relevant here?
Exactly. I just named this one number of 1.1 billion, to be very accurate. But to claim that you are facing losses and damages, you need to prove it somehow. So all our systems are very data driven, and the challenge with people living or working in informality is that they are very, very often outside of the formal data system. A normal census would not capture what they are, the conditions they are living in, or if, for instance, their houses get destroyed after a disaster. So if you do not have the baseline data, how can you claim that you are impacted by climate change related disasters? So the data question is very essential, and you initially asked about the now. Why is it important now? It is now that all these modalities, all the measures, and also the funding streams are being designed, and also questions of how do we capture, how do we assess the losses and damages are being assessed, and that informality question should be in there.
Okay. And in developing concrete questions, what can loss and damage experts learn from urban development practices and also actors?
So my background is also from urban planning, and anytime I'm listening to debates on losses and damages in the context of cities, I'm like, oh yeah, we've been there a couple of decades ago. For instance, the question of relocation, which is a valid one, because if, for instance, flood levels are getting higher, what do we do with the people? Are we rebuilding, or do we make them leave their places? That's very burning topic in the context of informality, where in the past we've seen a lot of evictions, and they do not necessarily go well. If you force out people without giving them a better livelihood, their fragility, their vulnerabilities will even grow in the future. Even if they might be affected less by that particular flood or flood area, they will be vulnerable to other things in other areas. So we need to look at this in a holistic way, and there we can learn a lot from urban planning experiences in the past, including on how to upgrade and make settlements more secure in the place where they are.
Okay, that makes sense. So right now, the IPCC special report on climate change and cities is being developed right now. So how do we make sure that questions on informality and also the growing impacts from climate-induced disasters are adequately represented?
Yeah, in urban research, or even in the context of climate research, that's one of the biggest topics right now. And that report will be published in a little less than 2 years from now. But the data that goes into the report has to be produced right now. And it has to come from cities, but also from research, so that we have all the scientific evidence about, including about losses and damages faced from climate-induced disasters, to have the best science possible in 2 years from now. So what we need now is the gray literature, which is the one that cities do have, but also researchers producing more research about it to close this data gap that I mentioned earlier.
Okay. And looking ahead, I mean, we're at the SBs right now, and this year's COP will be in Brazil. So how far do you see this benefiting the urban climate action?
Yeah, again, Brazil is a country which is urbanized to more than 80% already. So, and Brazil has been a very progressive country when it comes to urban policy in the past. They even have a ministry for cities, a ministry of cities. So that already shows the importance and the relevance of the topic. But Brazil right now is designing the modalities for the upcoming climate conference in November. And one of the very unique features is the so-called mutirão, which is a very Brazilian way of, let's say, doing local work, doing community gatherings and work together to improve a certain situation. And they explicitly want to have that spirit for the COP, which will hopefully be a window of opportunity to also bring local communities, their voices, but also their needs closer to this. So the more we now understand ourselves as sitting in the same boat and needing to work on that urban informality context, the more helpful it will be for Brazil. And they are certainly backing this with a very strong urban agenda there.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And this is it for today's Science Talk. And thank you, Simone, for being here. And watch out for our next Science Talk. Thank you.